Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel, and welcome back to where I'm going through the top 100 games at Board Game Geek and giving a little bit of my thoughts on all of them. Now each week I take a look at, or each time I do this, I take a look at 10 of them. Like I said, I played most of the games there, and today I've happened to play all 10 of these. So let's get started with number 70. Now I'm going to have to take back what I said earlier. I thought Suburbia was the biggest hit from Bezier Games, but higher rated than that is Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I like Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I think it's a great game. I like Suburbia a little bit better, but I will say I like the theme of Castles of Mad King Ludwig better, because the theme of this game is building a castle. Well, this is a punch sheet, so we want to actually see like a castle being built. So that's one aspect of the game, right? Here's one of the castles. This one is being built nice and neatly here. I don't think this one is going to happen in too many games, but you have these hallways and you're building different rooms, and as you place the different rooms in the hallways, you're going to be getting points. But the whole focus of the game is going to be based around you offering. So this picture here does a good job at showing it. This picture here shows the game. It shows the different tiles that you can get, and you're going to, on your turn, you're putting these tiles on the different prices here on the board, and you're determining how much people are going to pay you to take those tiles, and then the tile you want, you'll pay for. But if you make the tile you want too cheap, someone else might take it. So you might want to make it more expensive, but then you got to pay more money. I like that concept. It can lead to some thinking, but after that, once you get these tiles, you're then placing them on the board and scoring points based on how they get there. They have different doorways and things. The game looks really cool. I really like how it comes across. Actually, this one is one I really like the expansion for. They made a moat expansion, which kind of focuses the board a little bit, doesn't have it sprawl too much, but just the idea of putting the pieces out themselves. Hey, look, a little castle that I'm building on my own here, but also in a sense, the game itself, that buying and selling and figuring out how much, it has a nice, strong economic element to it. So a lot of fun, Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Number 69 is Descent: Journeys in the Dark 2nd Edition. Now, Descent has had its detractors, has had people who like it, but the simple fact of the matter is this is probably the ultimate dungeon crawl as a board game for many people. We'll talk a little bit more about this one later, and you can see everything that comes in this one now. Descent 2nd Edition is obviously based on Descent 1st Edition, which was based on a game called Doom. Doom came out, Doom the board game, you walked around and shot creatures up. They've actually made a sequel to that game, which takes it in a different direction, but the original one was like a dungeon crawl. And it was a pretty good system, had some flaws. Well, they copied it with Descent. The problem with the Descent is you would go into Descent as a hero, and you would just be basically running around, and like, here's some of the boards, by the way, for Descent. You'd be running around and you start at some little doofus, and by the end you were like just slaying the final bad guy. So they came out with an expansion for Descent and made it into a campaign setting. It took 200 hours. You played different sections. Fantastic. So Descent 2nd Edition, what they did then was they took that cool campaign that they had to the first one and brought it into play for the second one. So now you have a more streamlined system and a campaign setting. You still get the amazingly fun miniatures, all these different monsters, but they did it to build up in a much better way, and the game feels much more like a one versus all game where the overlord isn't having to pull their punches or struggle to survive. Because in the first one, after a while the characters got so powerful, the overlord's like, well, here, just kill my stuff. In this one, it feels balanced, and not every mission was kill everything in sight. This game is still being supported on the Android and iPad, where they have digital where you can play this, although they haven't put out any new products in a while, but still a very popular game and one I enjoy, Descent. Number 68 is Crokinole. Now 68 is kind of an anomaly to me. Don't get me wrong, I like Crokinole, but I find it weird that this is like a dexterity game that's okay to like. So we'll just take a look here at the main picture for this. This picture here is of a typical Crokinole board, and the way Crokinole works is you are flicking these discs, trying to get them in the middle, in that center hole if possible, but other than that in the ring, but you have to bounce your disc off someone else's disc for that to work. If you just hit a disc, the first person just shoots and tries to get in the middle. After that, you have to bounce it off one of your opponent's discs, hoping to knock their disc off the board or into a lower ring and yours into one of the higher rings, and if possible into the middle. That's the whole game. There's some minor, technicalities, and that very simplicity seems to do it really well. There's all kinds of custom crokinole boards that people have. I know that Board Game Geek cans went out every year, or they have one that you can win as a prize at each Board Game Geek con. And wow, some of these boards here look really beautiful. Let's take a closer look at this one here. There's a pirate ship. I like that. So I think part of it is, hey, they can be a piece of artwork, because there's a lot of really great dexterity games that are like this, but for some reason this one does really well. Oh, look at that, the Fantastic Four. Oh, I really like that one. That's the kind of board I would get. That one's really neat. So I like the fact that you can get these cool boards. I'm just surprised like this beats out a lot of other dexterity games, but it's still an excellent game. Number 67 is The Gallerist. Well, hello, heavy Euro game. And yes, The Gallerist is a heavy Euro game, even if you don't think so. For most people, it's going to be heavy, and it's a game where you're putting art displays. Now, realize this game has a lot of pieces involved in it. I mean, look at this. As we look at the board here, you're going to be placing workers. You have these big workers that you're placing in a different section, and then you're doing different things, whether you are getting an artist to come, commissioning an artist to paint art for you, or putting that art up in your gallery. You can see they even have little stands here. The theme here is pretty strong. Well, I'm not so sure about these little tiles, but you're basically trying to attract people to come and visit your art gallery, to get these people to come in and look at your art and sit there and go, And so this game does a good job of bringing that theme to life, but it's also a pretty excellent game. I'm of the opinion for myself, at points it feels like much ado about nothing, and I think that's more of a personal preference. Like, I don't know that I want to play games that have this many moving parts, and I don't feel like the game gives as much back as I put into it. But that's me, so obviously it is very highly rated on Board Game Geek, and you can see here just the artwork on the board is phenomenal. It's an amazing production, and so I think a lot of people are going to like The Gallerist. Well, I shouldn't say I think. Obviously, a lot of people do. Number 66 is Santorini. Santorini is a two-player abstract strategy game. It says 2016 on here, but the game essentially came out in 2017 at the end of the year. And this is a 2 to 3 player. I think they added something that made it a 4-player game based on the city of Santorini, which is well known for the way that these buildings look, and they look just like they do in this picture. This picture is essentially the game. On your turn, you are placing a tower piece on the board and moving your character, and you are trying to move your character to the top of the building, which makes you win. You are putting these blue cones on top of buildings so other people can't get to them. But what makes the game different is, as you can see here, here's the board with some pieces on it, is each person, once you play the full game, each person has one of these guides, which is going to change dramatically what you can do. You have a special, maybe victory condition, or maybe you have a special ability that you can do. And each one of these different guides that it shows here, and there's a whole pile of them, is going to change how you play, and in essence, change the way the game plays in general, because you're like, oh, wow, they can do that? So I got to change everything on how I think. And there's also a Golden Fleece expansion, which adds even more to it, and you add that to the fact that this game looks phenomenal. Plus, this game is now out in the mass market. I've seen it in either Toys R Us or Target, which is fantastic. Now, it's not as grandiose looking. They slightly made the components look a little not as good, slightly. Still pretty awesome. And it's an abstract strategy game that I love. Santorini. Number 65 is Pandemic. What am I even supposed to say about this game? This is one of those games that when you play it, you're like, of course, Pandemic, the ultimate cooperative game. It is Z Garcia's favorite game. It is extremely high on Eric Summer's list. Almost everyone I know likes Pandemic to some degree. There are a few people who don't like it, but the game theme itself is it's a theme that's attractive. Hey, we want to stop diseases from taking over the world. Sign me up. I think that's a good idea. And that's what Pandemic is. It's you have these people here, and you have they each have a special ability. You have 4 actions on your turn. It's the very epitome of a game where do bad stuff, or do good stuff, then bad things happen. Then do good stuff and bad things, and you're trying to stop these diseases. It has spawned many sequels to it, from Pandemic, Cthulhu, to Pandemic Iberia, to Pandemic Legacy, the big brother where it takes the whole campaign. But it's all based on this very specific system, and it just works really well. It's come out with a 2nd edition. Lots of people like the idea. It's just disease cubes that are coming to destroy humanity, and you have to stop them somehow. And you play in the hard levels of Pandemic, and it's nigh impossible to beat, but at the same time, it feels good as a group. It scales well. Yeah, I can see why Pandemic's popular. Number 64 is Tigers and Euphrates, which, if I remember correctly, was number 2 at one point. It might have even been number 1. This game came out in 1997. 20 years ago this game came out. That's phenomenal. This is one of the games that put Rainer Knizia on the map. I mean, he was always a popular designer, but this is considered by many to be his ultimate game. And in this game, you are building next to the river, Tigris and Euphrates, with these tiles. And you are placing your leaders. You have 4 different leaders of 4 different colors next to these rivers and trying to, basically control a city of tiles. And then you will fight with other people. There's an internal conflict where you fight with red tiles, or an external conflict where you fight with other tiles. You're drawing tiles from a bag. You have to know the right time when to go after other people. And then your different palaces, you'll see there's some palaces here that you control. They're going to be getting you cubes every turn, or just by putting tiles in a city you control will get you cubes. And you have 4 different colored cubes based on your 4 leaders. And at the end of the game, your score is your smallest amount of color. So there's a lot back. It's a mean game. Right? This is a Euro game, but it's one of the meanest Euro games I know, where you are going back and forth and attacking other players. And these combats, there's, for me, a lot of luck. I kind of fluctuate on this. One day I'm like, this is amazing. Next day I'm like, I don't know. I drew no red tiles when I needed them, and he drew 5. Come on, how's that possible? But it also plays well for 2 players. It's one of the first online board games I ever played. Board Game Geek implemented a way to play this online, and I played a lot of games on that with a lot of different people. So there's just a lot of cool things here. I think it's best with 2 players, but it can play up to 4, Tigris and Euphrates. Number 3 is Troyes, or Troyes, I guess, depends on how you pronounce it. This is a game I do not like. And it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint as to why I'm not a fan of it, because it has dice. I like dice. Look at this. There's different actions. It's not a cooperative game at all. You're going after other players. But I think the main reason I'm not a big fan of it is because of the negative events that happen into it. It just feels like you are constantly clawing your way up, which I don't mind in a cooperative game, but in a competitive game, I want to play against the other players, not necessarily play against the game. You can see these negative cards down here at the bottom. It is a cool production, and again, this is one where I'm an extreme minority on. A lot of people really like this game, so you should probably check out their reviews, not mine. Then number 62 is Trajan. Trajan is one of the most well-renowned Stefan Feld games. Now, Stefan Feld is known as the Point Salad King, and nowhere, I think, is that better personified than in the game Trajan. So here's the game board for Trajan. Let's see if I can find a picture of the game board with pieces on it. Let's see. I thought I saw one. Yeah, there we go. So in Trajan, it's kind of a Mancala aspect to it, where you're going to be on your own board, and in this picture here, you can see it here at the top, where you have these pieces and you're moving them around, and depending on how you move them, depends on the actions you get. And then your actions you're going to be taking are on this board, and you might put people out in this area here at the top, where there's a map, and that will get you points. Or put people here in this grid, which will give you tiles, which will give you points. Or over here with the ships, it gets you points. Or these tiles down here. And it's mostly about this little rondel where you're moving pieces around. Like, you're really focused on that, trying to think, if I move this here, then I can move this here. And at the same time, what is the most efficient way? Whatever action you take is going to get you points, but you want to get more points than everyone else. So there's a lot of cool things. Very highly recommend it. Trajan. And then the last one for today, number 61, is Dominion. When Dominion came out, it shot into the top 100. It has been there since it came out 10 years ago. This is the ultimate deck building game, or at least it's the first deck building game, and it's probably still the deck building game that has sold more than any other. You have a bunch of cards that you start with. You basically just start with some coppers and some estates, and you are trying to get rid of those and buy from 10 random piles of cards. And so the box itself comes with a whole just stacks of different cards. I want to say there was over 500 cards in the original game. There is 11 expansions for the game with even more cards. There are die-hard Dominion people out there. There's not a lot of theme in this game, but there definitely is a lot of variety. And every time you look at the 10 different stacks out there and say, okay, what's the best way to buy these cards to put into my deck and then play them? You can love Dominion, you can hate Dominion, but there's no denying Dominion has had a huge impact on the industry with deck building games in general, and I still enjoy it. 10 years later, there's all these other cool deck building games out, and I'm like, hey, why don't we just play Dominion and play that for a little bit? This fast, quick deck building game. Excellent. So, well, there we go. We're still not even halfway through the top 100, but we've gotten through some great games. What's coming up in the future? We'll see in the next video. What do you think of this 10? Let me know in the comments. Until then, I'm Tom Vasel, going through the Board Game Geek Top 100 on the Dice Tower.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.